The early 2000s were when NASCAR was arguably at its peak popularity both in terms of attendance and TV viewership. As a result, corporate sponsorship money flowed very freely in the sport. This also granted a good opportunity for someone who was wanting to come into the sport to make a quick buck. One of these people was Angela Harkness. Harkness was, to say the least, a figure with an interesting background. She was born in Iran in 1976 as Fatemeh Karimkhani. During the Iran Revolution in 1979, her family fled to Osnabrück, West Germany. Karimkhani claimed her father was a general in the pre-revolution Iranian government and that she earned a degree in psychology before turning 19 years old. She eventually moved to the United States, specifically Texas in 1995, where Karimkhani married Rayford Tyler. However, that marriage was short-lived. In 1998, Karimkhani moved to California, where she started to go by the name Angela and worked at a strip joint called the Candy Cat in San Francisco Valley. While working as a stripper, Karimkhani met Dion Harkness, a judge for the California State Comprehension Board. They soon got married, but their relationship was abusive. On one occasion, Harkness was arrested after bruises were discovered on Karimkhani, ending his career as a judge. Another accusation of domestic violence against Harkness further set back his career as an attorney after getting put on a 3-year probation by the California State Bar. Finally, on March 4, 2001, Harkness committed suicide by shooting himself in a Red Roof Inn hotel room. By this point, Fatemeh Karimkhani was going under the name Angela Harkness. In the aftermath of her husband's suicide, Harkness moved back to Austin, Texas and worked as a stripper at the Yellow Rose. Here she met Gary Jones, a married man who was the vice president at the Wells Fargo Bank in North Austin. Eventually, Jones left his family to be with Harkness, and he soon started taking out fraudulent loans for the benefit of the couple in the names of various family members of Harkness. Eventually, in mid-2002, the two hatched a scheme to enter NASCAR. They would create a team and use fraudulent loans as the startup costs. The main thought was that this could easily be made up by getting a major company to become the team's sponsor. The team would later be known as Angela's Motorsports. The issue started to appear when the team struggled to get a major company to join them as a sponsor. Luckily, Jones was able to find a company willing to come on board in the form of WiredFlyer.com, a travel agency website whose owner Rick Barton was a client of Jones at Wells Fargo. WiredFlyer would pay for the team's travel expenses rather than paying money directly for being on the car. Initially, the team intended to compete part-time in the NASCAR Busch Series, now the Xfinity Series, at the end of the 2002 season with David Green. However, putting the team together took longer than what Harkness and Jones were expecting, and Green instead drove for Hendrick Motorsports. Meanwhile, popular veteran Mike McLaughlin, a 6-time winner in the series, was informed that he would not be returning to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2003. After getting replaced by Coy Gibbs, McLaughlin would sign to drive with Angela's Motorsports for 2003. In a press conference at Atlanta Motor Speedway, the car displayed WiredFlyer as the major sponsor. McLaughlin was told the website was paying $5 million to the team. Meanwhile, Barton was told that his company was just a placeholder on the car until a larger sponsor could be found. Harkness would purchase equipment and Ford engines from Robert Yates Racing, who was exiting the Busch Series for about $900,000. After testing at Homestead Miami Speedway, Angela's Motorsports intended to make their debut at the Bashas' Supermarkets 300 at Phoenix International Raceway. Jay Sauter attempted to make the field, but ultimately failed to qualify for the race. The team would return the following race, the season-ending Ford 300 at Homestead, with Sauter and Kevin LePage driving. LePage would qualify in 28th place and Sauter in 31st. In the race, Sauter finished 2 laps down in 25th, while LePage retired after 128 laps due to brake failures and finished in 37th place. Afterwards, Jones took out a $250,000 loan in the name of Harkness's mother. It would be used to pay Yates $100,000 and McLaughlin $150,000. In the offseason, Harold Holley was signed on to be the crew chief, and Clyde McLeod would be hired as the team manager. By January 2003, Wells Fargo was noticing that Jones was taking out fraudulent loans, causing him to be fired. The team had still not found any corporate sponsorship beyond WiredFlyer, who was not actually sponsoring the team directly. The money being raised from Jones's loans happened to be the only money being put into the race team. Despite these issues, McLaughlin and Angela's Motorsports would participate in the January 2003 test at Daytona and would have the 10th fastest speed. Meanwhile, due to a lack of payments, Yates reclaimed various tools and engines from the team's shop. Officially, Angela's Motorsports closed down on January 28, 2003. This caused 17 employees to be laid off. All of them had to be owed thousands of dollars in payment. McLaughlin would sell equipment he owned to pay off the creditors and also give crew members 2 weeks' pay. The team's cars would be sold to J. Robinson Racing. There would then be severe consequences for people involved with Angela's Motorsports in the wake of the team's implosion. Mike McLaughlin was unable to find a full-time ride and drove for 4 different teams part-time through the end of the 2004 Busch Series season. He then retired from competition to become a test driver for Joe Gibbs Racing. However, a bright spot for McLaughlin came at the 2003 season-opening Coolers 300 at the Daytona International Speedway. It was there he drove an ex-Harkness Ford Taurus for J. Robinson Racing in an effort that raised over $80,000 in sponsorship from various donations. Some of the donors included Darrell Waltrip, Todd Bodine, and Greg Zipadelli. He qualified in 4th place but was involved in a crash with 2 laps to go and finished 29th. Unfortunately for Wired Flyer, the association with Angela's Motorsports was bad publicity for the fledgling website. Amidst stress and an increasing heart issue that already existed, owner Rick Barton died on July 30th at the age of 48 years. His widow ultimately blamed the death on Harkness. Soon after, Jones opened a sports bar in Temple, Texas. However, following an FBI investigation related to embezzlement, charges were filed against Jones and Harkness in early 2004. Harkness pled guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to commit bank fraud, but promised to testify against Jones and was released on bond. Meanwhile, Jones himself pled guilty to charges of theft, embezzlement, and bank fraud. Awaiting sentencing, Harkness would return to work as a stripper at the Yellow Rose for about a week before escaping to Mexico in March 2004 with her daughter. Later in the year, it was discovered that she was working as a beautician in Dubai, United Arab Emirates, after a letter was discovered in her sister's trash can. Harkness was returned to American custody in 2007. Both Jones and Harkness served 3 years in prison. In February 2012, Harkness was arrested on theft and service charges. Then in December 2018, Harkness was arrested again on charges of violence against a family member. Angela's Motorsports is an almost textbook example of grifters trying to make a quick buck in a place that is rife with it, all while not caring about who might get hurt in the process.